Hey, this is Kirk Graham, and you're listening to the Making of an Exception podcast. And today we've got Spencer Hutton, who is a husband, father, golfer, really good golfer. And you are the president of Commonwealth Real Estate Group. And thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Super stoked to be able to hear your story, share your story with our audience. And I'd love to hear, just jump in right away, who you are, the business that you started, kind of where you're at today, even family stuff, if you want to share a little bit of that.
Yeah. So, husband first, father second. So my wife, Amber, my kids, I've got a 6-year-old daughter, Peyton, and my 3-year-old son, Elliot. Super involved in our church and our friends, and do real estate as my vocation. But, really see that as just kind of the vehicle for getting out there and meeting people and making an impact. So
that's awesome. How long have you been married?
We have been married. We're coming up on 9 years here, which is hard to believe. But thank you.
No, it's awesome. It goes by quick.
It does.
We're coming up on 7, and I don't know how it goes so fast. It's crazy.
And every year goes faster.
Yeah. How does life keep getting faster? I was telling somebody the other day, when I was in like 2nd grade, I would look at the clock and think, man, 2 p.m. it's never going to get here. Like it felt like forever.
Yep.
And now I've been married for almost 7 years. Like time just keeps getting faster and faster. 6th grade, I was like, how do I have 6 more years of this?
Yep.
This is crazy.
I also was chatting the other day with somebody, and I remember making the comment of like, I remember when I was 21 looking at somebody who was in their mid-30s and going like, man, they got it figured out and they're so far along, whatever. Now I'm in my mid-30s and I'm like, I do not feel that way.
Yeah, crazy.
It's like, I was 21 yesterday.
Time's flying. So you have 2 kids. You guys going to have more kids?
To be determined.
Yes.
Open to more kids. Love our children. Love kids. I came from a little bit bigger family. We had 5 children, counting me, in our family. But our second son had some medical hardships when he was born. Yeah. And so that's it's my wife's call. It's her body. It's her decision. It's, she's the one who's affected far more than I am through the child birthing process. So I've always said, even before that, I always said it was her decision and, we'd make it together. But ultimately she was kind of the trump card. And, she, she was, there's those like women who are like, being pregnant completes me. That's not my wife. And so she was always hesitant about having more than 2 to begin with. But then when my son had some of his issues, it was kind of like, maybe we'll put things on pause here.
And we'll talk a little bit about that today and how you've been able to lead your family through some of those challenges. I think that's awesome, because some husbands can have a strong opinion about their family, and I'm saying the same thing. We just had our 2nd daughter days ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And it is awesome, but we don't feel like the parents that are like, man, having infants is like the joy of our life. We love our kids for sure, but it's not like this is the greatest. I mean, we're like get us to 2 years old and or get us to sleeping through the night and we're good. So
absolutely.
Same thing is if my wife wants to do it again, great.
Yep.
If not, we would like to adopt a girl from India. My older brother is adopted, and so we'll see if we go that route. But
my older brother's adopted as well.
Was he the first, or like in line, or?
Well, and it's kind of a longer, but we never legally, officially adopted him. My parents
stole him.
Yeah. Yes. So this isn't public, right?
We're not recording. Just speak into that microphone.
My parents were, before any of us were around, were medical missionaries in Africa.
No way.
And so my mom taught English there, and my dad was a doctor and did some medical missions work in Africa and Liberia. And so they just kind of met this family over there. And when they came back to the States, that family reached out to him and just said, hey, can we send our son over to live with you? It's weird because he doesn't know how old he is. They don't keep track of that out there. So best they can guess is that, he was like 14 plus or minus 3 years or whatever.
No way.
When he came over and started living with my parents. And that was like, might have been just before I was born or right as I was. So like, I don't remember any of that, obviously.
Yeah. So he's 14-ish years older than you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So he's probably even more than that. But yeah, he's like in his 50, plus or minus 5 years.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah. And I just remember growing up thinking he was my brother until I was old enough to figure out like, hey, how did that guy come from my parents?
Totally. Same thing. My brother's Guatemalan, and we just grew up buds, you know, like the old pictures. He's 2 years older. The pictures of when we were kids, it's just like little Guatemalan boy and little white Norwegian boy. Yep. But we're brothers, and so we've always been brothers. He married a Puerto Rican, so I think it's awesome that we're gonna have white children that have first cousins of full Hispanic kids and their cousins. You know, it's like my daughter's gonna be able to say like at school, like my cousins, they got my back and they're Hispanic. You know, like I think that's awesome. So it's super cool. Yeah. Do you guys think like adoption might be in your future?
I think it's possible. Definitely something we talk about and we're open to. And many people, my sisters adopted 2 little girls. My cousins. My cousin is adopted, and they've adopted some kids, and so adoption kind of runs in our family, and so it's definitely something
it's super
we're
cool.
open to for sure.
We'll talk about it in a little bit, but part of your company and the generosity of just who you are is to help rescue children and help give them homes. As you're selling homes here in Minnesota to help provide shelter in Nepal through Venture. And so, again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I love that that's your heart in helping rescue kids, whether it's through adoption in your family or across the planet, kids you'll never meet on this side of eternity. I think that's amazing.
Absolutely.
So I'd love to hear about Commonwealth Real Estate Group and just what that is here in Minnesota and kind of the business that you're building. And kind of where it got started.
Yeah. So I became a real estate agent in 2011. Was working at North Central University, downtown Minneapolis, for several years prior to that, and found out that my wife was pregnant with our first child. And loved working at North Central. Worked in athletics there. Felt like I was making a huge impact and kind of living out some of my calling in life. Kind of really found my calling in life through that season. However, a nonprofit Christian university doesn't always buy a whole lot of diapers and formula and things like that. So
just enough.
I was primary income earner and solo income earner. And so we kind of started talking like, well, this was a great season, but probably need to start looking for a different avenue as we prepare for a child. So
do you have family members that were in real estate? How did you choose that route?
Nope. Nobody in my family was in real estate. Nobody in my family had started their own business or anything like that. My dad was actually very hesitant about me.
Sure.
Which in hindsight, I'm like, expecting a child, thinking that I need to make more money to buy diapers and formula and quitting my job and moving over to a business owner commission-based career. Not the wisest move at the moment, but it worked.
It worked. Yeah.
So
praise God.
Always had an interest in real estate. Bought a home in college because it didn't make sense to me to pay rent in college. So bought a home in college, had my friends rent from me, paid for the mortgage that way.
Genius. I've heard the term house hacking.
Yeah. Shouldn't have worked. That was pre-2008. So shouldn't have been able to get a mortgage. But literally walked into a bank, kind of pitched them my idea, and they were like, yeah, sure, here you go.
You're a perfect candidate. It's amazing.
Worked that time, but obviously didn't work several times for banks at that time. But that was kind of my first foray into it, and bought a house right after college too when I moved back to Minnesota. And so I just kind of always done it, and was the guy who'd like walk into an open house on a Saturday just to walk around or whatever. And so my wife was actually the one who we actually met with a real estate agent to sell our house and kind of take the funds from that and to buy us some time and whatnot. And as we were meeting with him, my wife started asking him a bunch of questions about what's it take to be and all that kind of stuff. And afterwards she was like, I think you should be a real estate agent.
No way.
And I was like, okay. She's like, well, you're doing it all the time anyways. You might as well get paid for it.
You're going to all these open houses. Like we never see you on Saturday.
So looked into it and found out that it's relatively easy, for better or worse, to become a real estate agent.
Yeah.
So went down that path, jumped into it in 2011, was solo for 3 years, but became pretty successful pretty quickly. And 3 years into it was just burning myself dry.
Really?
Yeah. Like, so the average agent in the state of Minnesota does like 6 to 8 deals a year. And
No way.
And that year I did like 33 or something like that.
Just on your own.
Just on my own with no admin, no assistant, no anything, just me doing everything. And I got to the end of, that would have been 2014, I believe, got to the end of 2014. And for like a month had this kind of cough that showed up and couldn't kick it, just thought it was a bad cold, but it just kind of kept getting progressively worse. And then one night in December, I moved out of the bedroom because I was just keeping my wife awake at night because I was just like constantly coughing and was struggling to breathe. And about, probably like 1 a.m, I was sitting there just really like literally the like
No
just
way.
like could not breathe. And we had a kid at the time, so I was like, I'm just going to let my wife sleep and I'm just going to drive into the hospital. Because I was like, oh, we're not waking our sleeping baby.
Yes.
So ended up in the hospital for several days. That was right around the time that Ebola was a big thing.
Yeah.
And so I came in and they couldn't figure out what was wrong. I was this healthy, relatively healthy 30-year-old, but like was having all these issues. And they quarantined me for 24 hours because they couldn't figure out. And this was when Ebola was happening and all this. So they were like,
Just in case it was Ebola.
just in case it was something. And they brought in an infectious disease specialist and all this stuff.
What's quarantine like? You're in a room by yourself?
Yep.
Or like
Yep.
you're
so
in
nobody can come. Like my wife couldn't come see me. Anybody who came into the room was like in a hazmat suit.
No
Kind of not that drastic, but that type of thing.
You really feel like everything's gonna be okay.
Yes, yeah. The first room they put me in was like in the back of the hospital with like no windows, no nothing. Like not like it was just like a 6x8 concrete, cell with just a clock on the wall. And I was there for like 4 hours by myself.
You're
and I'm
in prison.
Yeah, pretty. And I'm there like by myself. And at one point I hit my phone didn't work because I was just in this room and I hit this like, what if the world ended? And I didn't know.
That's so funny.
It's been where does anybody know I'm back
you see
here?
that on shows, like somehow there's a zombie apocalypse and you've been stuck in this room for weeks. Yeah, that's crazy.
But yeah, so.
What was it?
Well, so they never figured out what really was wrong. Other than, I just essentially, the doctor
panic attack.
Yeah. Well, the doctor just told me he was like, I think you just need to go sleep.
No way.
So I actually went down to Northfield, Minnesota, which is one of my favorite places in the entire state. I just started driving and stumbled across Northfield, which I know it's not a unknown place, but I just had never been there or anything, and grabbed a room at the historic hotel down there. And I literally slept for almost 3 days.
No way.
And, I think it was just one of those things where you have buckets in your life. You have your family bucket, your faith bucket, and your finance bucket, and your health bucket. And you only have capacity for so much. And you can lift one up above the others, but you're going to be stealing from something. And for me, I'd made a commitment in my life that I wasn't going to steal from my family.
Yeah,
I wasn't going to steal from my friends or my kids. I wasn't going to steal from my finances. So I chose to steal from my health. Not consciously, but subconsciously. And, paid the piper.
Yeah.
So it was through that I realized I need to do something different. This isn't worth. And it was through this heart of helping people that was why I helped 30 some people. But I was like, I gotta bring a team of people around me that have the same heart, the same drive.
Yeah. It wasn't just about the money.
No.
It was about the purpose of trying to help people find homes.
Yep.
And make a difference across the world through generosity, all that. But so then you added a team of people?
Yeah. So in 2015, that's when I kind of officially launched Commonwealth as a group.
Got it.
and hired an admin and an agent. And then now we've grown to, we presently have 4 agents and 2 staff.
Wow.
And we've had a couple agents come and go in that time too.
And how many deals a year are you guys doing as a group?
Yeah, we hover right around 75 plus or minus.
Yeah.
We're on pace for somewhere between 75 to 100 this year. So and our volume has kind of risen. I was doing like 10 to 12 on my own, 10 to 12 million on my own, and in sales volume.
Yeah.
And we should be right around that 20 to 25 mark here this year. But I've always said that success like that, or talking about numbers like that, that's just a byproduct of the philosophy we have.
Yeah.
We actually don't really set goals. And that's actually one of the things I love about, when we'll probably get more into this later, but through our giving initiatives, we've kind of reframed and flipped upside down how we set goals. Instead of it being, hey, we want to do 25 million this year and 125 deals. Well, why? Because it's more than we did last year.
Because it's a number that we haven't done yet.
Yeah. That just felt very empty. So through our giving efforts and through our whatever, we all of a sudden flipped like, well, how could we end up setting our goals differently through that lens? And so now it's like, we have a goal of reaching this many children.
Yeah.
In order to do that, we need to do this, and in order to do that, we need to do, and all of a sudden you work your production goals backwards off of what matters.
So, something of substance, something eternal, even. Rather than just a dollar number. I'd love for you to share the generosity side of your business, because there's a lot of business owners that personally they're generous, but they don't build it into the business because they're saying it's conflict of interest. It's not, we can choose to live as the owner of the company, or like personally, you could live a certain way, but you've built it into the culture of your business. Yeah. But I'd love for you to explain, kind of what you guys are doing, Commonwealth Group.
Yeah. So one of our core values when we started, we have 7 core values, but one of our core values when I started this thing was impact. Yep. And kind of our sub definition of that is that we believe the people and places we interact with will be better because we exist.
Yep.
So that's always been a tenet of ours. And in 2016, I tend to be somebody who's kind of constantly, for better or worse, constantly going, okay, this is good.
Yep.
How can it be better?
Yeah.
So in 2016, we were knocking it out of the park and impacting all these people's stories and having a huge year. But I just kind of got to the end of the year and was like, okay, this is great. If I'm 60 years old sitting on my front porch in a rocking chair, I'm going to have some really good stories to tell, and a legacy of ripple effects, and those are all good things.
Yeah.
But I just felt this burning desire that there was more. And so in 2017, I really spent asking the question of like, okay, so I know the main question that bubbled to the surface was, I know the people and places we interact with are living a better story because we exist.
Yeah.
But what about people and places we never interact with? Could their lives actually be better because we exist? So I started meeting with just a bunch of people, asking that question, and like, how could this happen? How could that play out?
Yeah.
And ended up through mutual connection, Paul Herkman and Venture, which is a nonprofit in the metro here that just does incredible things around many areas, human trafficking being one, but just they've got 4 or 5 major slavery or clean water wells or refugee help. So they're just, I can't say enough good things about their organization. But I met with Paul, and our paths had crossed several times randomly throughout the years. But several times we had remarked. I remember 2 times distinctly over like a 7-year stretch where we met once and then like didn't see each other for 3 years and then randomly connected again. And we're like, I feel like we keep connecting for some reason, but I don't know why. Like, let's just keep that door open. Then in 2017, circled back. That was probably in like 2012 or something like that. So 2017, we sit down for coffee and I'm asking this question, and he starts sharing about some of their human trafficking efforts in Nepal. And the homes they're building for these children, these 5, 6, 7-year-olds that are being rescued out of human trafficking, that are being born into a caste system that believes that that's why they exist. And it's just like human trafficking has been a buzzword for a while, and I knew.
Yeah, you know what happens.
You know what happens, and you know it's a big deal.
Yeah, totally.
But when you actually get some of the like firsthand story, and I have a 6-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he's talking, and I'm thinking about my 6-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
And just getting wrecked
in
the middle of this coffee shop in South Minneapolis, like apologizing to somebody for my heave sobbing in the booth here or whatever.
I feel like that's Paul Herkman's life. Is like every conversation he has, like the person on the other end is getting wrecked in a good way. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So it was in that this kind of give home philosophy got birthed. And so it's this find home, give home initiative is what we call it. And we found out that the resounding answer to that question of could people in places we never interact with be better, the resounding answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
So we committed to taking 5% of our gross revenue. So not, some people will do their profit at the end of the year. It's like, well, after we pay the bills and after we take it, whatever's left over, we'll give. But we just said, we're going to just take 5% straight off the top before bills, before anything. And whenever anybody buys or sells a home with us and they've found home, we're going to take that and send it to Nepal to give home to a child. And, we define finding home as a place that evokes joy and welcomes belonging and provides security. Yeah. And we want to give a home, a place that evokes joy and welcomes belonging and provide security to a child who desperately needs that in their life. They've never experienced that in their whole life. Yeah. And so we've been able to do that. And our goal, we had a huge goal of 50 children this year is we wanted to provide shelter to 50 children. And we're hoping that every year that number can grow. Cause we want to make an impact on those children's lives. Because nobody deserves it more than them.
Yeah, that's amazing, and I love the heart of generosity and what you're doing, and it's a perfect tie-in to what you're doing here, providing home for people here and across the world. I love the definition of home. And just the fact that you've built this into your business, and it's not just how you and your wife have chosen to live, but it's built into your business. Your employees are in on this. Mm-hmm. These are the goals you're setting. It's about these children, not just a dollar number.
Correct.
And how did you become this way? And that's why it's called the making of an exception. Yeah. I believe you are an exception to the rule. Not everybody is living the way that you are. Not every real estate agent or president of their group of what they're trying to build is doing business the way that you are. How did you become this way? Another way to phrase it in your words would be what has been the setting of your life growing up? Your family, were you raised this way? As things happen along, I'm sure it's both, but to become the way that you are, building business the way that you are, to be a part of something or to create something that's just bigger than just yourself.
Yeah. Great question. So growing up, for sure, the seeds of it were planted within my family. And I know like my dad specifically would always hammer into us that like, it's not about, and I think a lot of it was parenting technique of like, stop fighting. It's not about you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's like, please.
Whether his intention was this or not, but, it was a common phrase was just like, it's not about you. Like be it. And growing up with, 5 or 4 siblings, 5 kids total, and I mean, there's other families that have more children and things like that, but you kind of have to implement like, hey, sometimes your brother's going to get to do something you don't get to do. But be happy for them and be excited for them and
celebrate their wins.
Celebrate their wins and look for ways to make your siblings happy, and they'll look for ways to make you happy, and then we'll all be more happy. So that was kind of a tenet of growing up, and but I can really, when I think about my life, some of the major moments that impacted me and I believe shaped this were actually the lowest ends of my life. Death was actually something that I was introduced to pretty young. One of my friend's sister passed away in a car accident. I remember, like she was my friend's little sister. So she was probably only 5 or 6 years old when she passed away. And we were in like 4th grade or something like that. And so I remember being over at their house and playing with her one day. And then, you know, the next day she was gone. And so that was like the first moment where I remember thinking like, whoa, this life like isn't all just fun and games anymore. And then through junior high and even high school, I mean, there was a lot of death in my world. A lot of parents in our friend group that passed away. We had over a dozen parents in our friend group that passed away throughout our high school years. You know, of car accidents or cancer or on the job accidents or just, you know, freak things. So for a while that threw me kind of down, because at this time in junior high and high school, I didn't have much of a faith background. I didn't have, even though I grew up in a Christian home, I had that. I always say tragedy tends to either bring you closer to God or drive you further away. And I was a little bitter with God. You know, those questions of like, well, why would a good God allow that to happen? You know, why would he orchestrate that to happen? I think sometimes this is a red button topic, and
let's hit the red button.
Could be a whole nother podcast in and of itself. But, you know, sometimes in our efforts to comfort of, well, you know, there was a reason for this. God has a reason for this. You know, that can also sometimes be damaging of, why, you know, God, the enemy is the one who comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Or saying he's working this out for good. It's like, he's working out the death of my parent for good. Like, and even if that's true, good can come from tragedy. But he didn't do this so that this is not good. Yes.
And this is not him.
And this was not his design. This was not his desire. This was not, you know, I've come a long way and journeyed through a lot to get to that place. And, but at the time, those were some things that I'd heard. And then it was like, well, then if that's God, then I don't want anything to do with him. So what it did do was open my eyes to the fact that we don't know how long our story is. We don't know when our chapters are ending. And let's make the most of our time here. For several years in high school, I was that kid who everybody thought had it all together because I was successful and relatively popular. Lucked into that one.
You're a golfer.
Yes.
So successful in athletics or multiple areas too?
Yeah, multiple, but athletics mostly. I'd kind of always been an athlete growing up and always excelled. Like I was always, from the time I remember I was like 8 years old playing in a tennis tournament against like 14-year-olds and winning or whatever.
Crazy.
So just athletics had always been something that came naturally to me. Unfortunately, I was stuck in a 5'7" Scandinavian body.
Why can't I be 6'7"?
But the hand-eye coordination and things were there to allow me to excel, at least to a certain extent. But yeah, then golf was kind of the thing that floated to the top. I had some injuries in junior high that made non-contact sports not viable anymore, or contact sports not viable anymore. So switched over to golf, and had always had a passion about golf. Just always loved it.
You grew up golfing.
Grew up golfing from the time I could remember. I mean, pictures of me 1.5 years old carrying a club and swinging, and you know, barely walking and picking up a club, and so for a while, my identity was wrapped up in my success and. You know, on the surface, to most people who knew me, I had it all together. But when I'd go home, it was a wreck and depression, and why did all, you know, asking all these questions, why all these things happen. And
you were a wreck. Your family wasn't a wreck,
correct?
But you felt that way,
correct? Yes, I felt that way. And I had, you know, and I had this, and I know now, you know, I had this huge hole in my heart. Because I had turned my back on my father, my heavenly Father. You know, I had this hole, this gaping hole of love that needed to be filled. And so the way to fill that was winning tournaments and being funny. And, you know, and then my senior year, I'd signed a letter of intent to play golf for the University of Minnesota, which was the top program in the country at that time. They won the national championship in 2002, and that's when I signed my letter of intent with them. And so that seemed to be good. But in April of 2002, called up one of my buddies, and he picked up the phone and he was crying. And unbeknownst, I mean, he was my best friend in high school, and he was the kid that I would spend every day with and at their house all the time. And unbeknownst to me, he had just found his mom dead that day. And she was like my mom. She was the one I spent a ton of time with, being at his house. And so again, it was this, the death came knocking at the door, and walking through that journey with him and our friend group. And that was the one that sent me on a different trajectory. That's where my questions changed. Sure. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, that one sent me, the question started becoming, okay, this is reality. This happens. This is our life. This is our broken world we live in. Why am I here? Yeah. Why are we all here? Yeah. What purpose does this serve? It's got to be, for me, the question was, or it's got to be more than about hitting a little white ball into a hole. Yeah. That's great. It's fine. It's good. There's nothing wrong with it, but that is not the end all be all. That's not going to fill this hole in my heart and this pain and this. So my freshman year of college, going out on your own, wrestling with these questions, battling some depression. I don't think like clinical depression and like something I was born with, but just, circumstantial depression. And because I'd thrown off my identity and I'd wrapped my identity my identity was wrapped up in my circumstances. So if my circumstances were going great, I was doing great. If my circumstances were going bad, I was doing bad. And not having an anchor to tie my identity to.
It's so interesting. Even just on that point, that's how most people live their lives. Yep. And it's not a knock on most people. No. And I find myself there from time to time when the circumstance is not great. Is there a way to still be good and to still have joy or to still have peace, to still believe that everything's going to be okay? And I think that there's a challenge there, but the answer is yes, there is another way. Yes. And at what point, sorry, I kind of derailed your story.
No, you're good.
At what point did it become, man, how I was raised in the church, and this guy, Jesus, and all these stories of, he can work our pain for good. We're here for more than this. Like, at what point was it real for you? Like, this is real. There is more to just living, filling the gap in our hearts with just material, whether it's perception of people, success, winning tournaments, to your point.
Yeah, so I had pretty much a disaster freshman year of college because I was just mentally derailed.
Did you go to University of Minnesota?
Yep, I was at the University of Minnesota and played golf there my freshman year, and then that summer in between my freshman and sophomore year, I would play in these golf tours. So they were what you would do in the summer to get better and refine your game and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I would literally travel. I'd put like 30,000 miles on my car in a summer and travel because all of them are south. And being in Minnesota, so you got to drive down to, and I'd start in Oklahoma and then go to Texas and then go to New Mexico and then
every
Arizona.
Weekend
Just every weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday would be a tournament. I'd travel. It was like being on a professional tour, except I was paying to be there.
Totally.
But and at the time in 2002, 2003. Didn't have smartphone, didn't have a laptop, just different world, even though it doesn't seem like that long ago. So I would be in hotels and like get bored of hotel TV, and I would actually go to the Barnes and Noble down the road. I'd find the Barnes and Noble in town, and I'd go to the Barnes and Noble and I'd just pick up books and start reading. And I treated a Barnes and Noble like a library. Wow. So I'd read there. I'd read there, and I'd remember what book and what page I was on, and then the next city I ended up in, I'd go and pick up the book.
You're like highlighting, and then you put it back on the shelf. Learning so much.
Dog tagging you. But so I would do that, and I stumbled across this book called Through Painted Deserts by Donald Miller. it wasn't in the self-help section. It wasn't in a Christian section or a religious section. It was just kind of on a stand out. And I started reading it. It was just this beautiful book. And it's funny, I've read all of Donald Miller's books, and I'm a huge fan. And he's had a huge impact on my life. But sometimes I've heard him refer to it as like, yeah, that book was like, I look back now and that book, but it was a beautiful book. And it was basically just kind of his journey. It was almost like just a published journal of his journey on a road trip through life, and wrestling through questions and things. And there were a lot of questions I was wrestling through. And
you were reading that book, but also kind of on the same journey.
Yeah. Even
you're on a road trip.
Yeah. And even in the same like part of the country, and just, it just kind of lined up. And so those were like the seeds of faith and identity had been planted in me through my family. But I think whether it was intentional or not, I'm wired in a way where I'm kind of weirdly wired where I tend to react opposite to what, for better or worse, to what people tell me. So, for example, like I'm not rebellious in the nature that I do bad things.
Yep.
I'm rebellious, and if you tell me what to do, I'm going to say, why should I do that?
Yep.
So, for better or worse, my parents kind of let me be very independent in high school.
Yep.
And if they would have been forcing religion down my throat, I probably would have never turned that direction. But they didn't. The seeds were planted. But they didn't. Same with like drinking. Like they never told me not to drink. And if they had, I probably would have gone and drank.
Yeah.
But through high school, all my friends were telling me, hey, you should drink. And I was like, yeah, don't tell me what to do.
Wow.
So peer pressure had like the opposite effect on me. But it was that, they'd planted the seeds in me as a young kid. Yeah. And then kind of let me go.
Wow.
And those seeds began to be watered through that book. And then when I came back, I was planning to be at the U my sophomore year, but there was a coaching shift, and that coach decided to bring in new players. And so I showed up 2 weeks before school started, and he was like, yeah, we don't have a spot for you. So all of a sudden, 2 weeks before school starts, I'm no longer on the team. And that was my whole life goal. I had spent 16 years of my 19-year life trying to get there.
That's how it works. It's just a coach shows up and can say, "Yep, you're great, but you're not on the team."
Yep. So ended up having no idea where I was going to go, what I was going to do. I still wanted to play golf. And it's like second week of August and school starts in 2 weeks, and most places are full, and they've already found their team. And but I happened to land at a Division I university down in Texas called Stephen F. Austin State. They were one of 3 places in the country that had a spot. So I landed down there, drove down, and again, this was pre-smartphone and GPS. So I hear Stephen F. Austin State, and I'm thinking, oh, it's in Austin, Texas. So I pull out my Atlas that I had in my car and start driving to Austin, Texas. And like literally, that's how little I knew about the school. Like I didn't even know. I knew it was in Texas. I knew it was called Stephen F. Austin. I get outside of Austin and I like pull over to and like call the coach, close. And I'm like, okay, I'm just outside Austin. Where do I go? And he's like, oh, you're like 4 hours away. And I was like, what? What do you mean I'm 4 hours away? And he's like, oh yeah, we're in Nacogdoches. Which is 4 hours away from Austin, 2 hours north of Houston, in the middle of nowhere, town of about 14,000 people. School of about 14,000 people. So one of those.
There's no golf courses. We're just
our golf course was a half hour away.
No way.
From the college. So landed there, and my roommate, first day I meet him, he's like, hey, I got invited to this thing. He's on the golf team also. Yep. He's like, hey, I got invited to this thing. My neighbor back home works for this organization, and they host these retreats at this pro golfer's house. You want to go? I don't really. He goes, just fair warning, they're Christian retreats, but I just want to go meet this professional golfer. Do you want to come with me? And then we can hang out while we're there and whatever. And I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. So we went to one of those, and God just met me there. Wow. It was actually out in California. It was a whitewater rafting retreat. And, you're out in the middle of, it is actually the official home of Sasquatch. Again, another podcast, another day, but I have some stories that I believe.
You've seen Bigfoot.
This is really opening up the inside of me.
I'm glad we've gotten to this point. This is why you're here. We're going to talk about Bigfoot.
Yeah. Do Bigfoot calls for the next 10 minutes. But
you've got a call. You got a Bigfoot call? Let me just pull it out of my pocket.
But you're out in the middle of nowhere, and you are going like, oh yeah, something could hide out here if they wanted to.
Yeah.
And when you're like hit in the face with creation that way, and you realize how small you are and how tiny you are and how big this is, that's where God met me. And
wow.
I remember hearing, not audibly or anything like that, but just kind of hearing this phrase of like, I did all this for you. I did all this to dazzle you. I'm a good God. I didn't do the things that people have attached to me. This is what I did. The beautiful things in life, the good things in life, the amazing things in life. This is what I did.
Wow.
And I brought you here to show you this.
Wow.
And so that's where now, it took a while for that to actually stick.
Yeah.
But so for the next 2 years, I was like, okay, this is it. This is, and so for the next 2 years was kind of this up and down journey of figuring that out, and learning more about that. But I got to the place where I ended up just giving up golf altogether.
Wow.
Going into my senior year, I was just like, I have got to put my identity is so wrapped up in my golf game, and that it's such a like neural pathway in my brain that I have to just give this up completely so I can rewire this neural pathway in my brain. Because I would wrestle between this identity that I'd found and what my brain was telling me I was based on what I did. So I gave that up for 3 years. I didn't touch a club, and I'd spent 20 years of my 23-year life dedicated to golf. And, I wanted to be a professional golfer, and I thought that was the track that I was on. And so that was a really difficult thing to wrestle through, and to feel like this is who I am and I'm just going to give it up, and to feel like a failure, and to have those lies being spoken in the back of your mind of, well, what made you worthy, you just gave up on, you quit, you're a failure, you're whatever.
Yeah.
And being able to have the, for people who are having those questions, being able to have the courage to say, no, that's not who I am.
Yes.
That's a part of who I was, but that's not who I am.
Yes.
But I just felt I needed to walk away and find my identity outside of circumstances. And then be able to bring circumstances back into my life.
Yeah.
So I spent 3 years. I literally put my golf clubs in a closet, and I never looked at them again for 3 years. I never watched golf on TV. I'd go out on a date and somebody'd be like, hey, let's go mini golfing. And I'd be like, nah, I'm good. I didn't want anything to do with golf.
Really?
And kind of thought I'd be done forever. But then my now wife came into the picture at this time.
Yeah.
And we started dating, and she had a job at a golf course.
Yeah.
Being the cart girl.
No way.
And she didn't know, she met me after this season of my life. So she didn't know you were a golfer. She had no idea I was a golfer. And she approaches me one day and she's like, hey, I get free golf at this place because I'm a cart girl. We should go try golf together.
Let's go learn it together. It's like the worst. Okay, quick story. My wife, she, when we were dating, one of the first, my birthday, because I grew up playing golf, played in high school. My wife was like, hey, you love golf? Let's go golfing it was my first birthday while we were dating. And I was like, okay. I was raised like golf etiquette. Like, you don't run on the course, you don't yell on the course, you for sure don't lay down on the green and use your putter like a pool stick. But my wife did all of that. And it was one of the most challenging days of our relationship. I was like, I just for sure need to relax. But and it was like a par 3 course. It wasn't even like legit, but I was like stressed because of how I was raised, like what you do and don't do on a golf course. Yep. She broke all the rules, and we haven't golfed since. So But we've been married almost 7 years, and life's
Perfect.
good, so it's all good.
Perfect.
Anyways.
But yeah, so I'm like, sure, we can go play.
This is the first time you picked up
This is the first time I've picked up a club
in 3 years.
Over 3 years.
Yeah, wow.
And when I stopped, like I had derailed.
Yeah.
Because golf is such a mental game. And I was mentally wrestling through, and even on the golf course, I was wrestling through these, like, I'm not comfortable in my head and like all that kind of, and so like I was a scholarship Division I golfer who could like barely break 90 all of a sudden. Like went from, scratch golfer to like upper 80s to low 90s and like, but just because it was all between my ears. Wow. So I'm like, good. She'll think I just started playing because I'm expecting my last time I played, I shot like 88. So she'll think I just started playing and I'm halfway decent. So we go out and play, and I shot 5 under par. I shot a 67.
No.
And I was like, huh, that's interesting. And played.
What a great day to shoot 5 under par.
Yeah. Oh, is that good?
Yeah. It's so funny. It's my first day golfing.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking me.
So then I was like, okay, yeah. So growing up, I played a lot of golf.
You like had to open up.
Yeah. Well, I also, the negative was I set the bar very high. So like, I remember a month or two later, we're playing and I shot like a 74 and she was like, what happened? And I was like, that's still pretty good.
Like that's not bad. Jeez. Like people are dreaming of the day they can shoot 74.
But yeah, I played like 5 days in a row and the worst round I shot was like 3 or 4 under.
No way.
And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. What do I do with that? And at this point, I was fresh out of college and didn't know what I was going to do with life. And so I was like, well, maybe golf is coming back, and maybe playing professionally is still an option or whatever. But as I started to go down that path, I just realized that was not the path for me. I think it's possible that I could have done something with it, but I knew something in my gut was telling me that was not. Plus, I wanted a family, and I wanted a wife, and I wanted kids, and playing professional golf is not a good way to do that, especially at the beginning. So, and I was still growing in my faith, and I actually did a semester at seminary.
No way.
Because I was a new Christian, and I thought seminary is where you go to become a better Christian.
No way.
I thought it was like going to church every day.
Wow.
Found out that was massively different.
Oh yeah, it's overachieving.
But I met a guy there, and he was like, what you really should do is you should go to North Central and just audit some Bible classes. Like if you just want to hear some stuff about the Bible, just pay like $200 and audit a class and just go sit in the class, and you'll save a ton of money. And that's really, you're not doing this for like a vocation or anything.
No, you're just doing it for the education.
Yeah. So I started doing that. And this was all happening at the same time. Wow. And I heard somebody say like, oh yeah, North Central's kind of starting a golf team. It used to be like a club team, and they just got their NCAA Division III status, and so they're starting a golf team. And I was like, oh, cool. So I was like, who's coaching it? And they were like, oh, this guy up on the second floor. So I go up there and I knock on his door, and I walk in and I'm like, hey, are you starting the golf team? And he's like, yeah. It's like, you play? I was like, yeah, but I don't have any eligibility left. But this is my story. Can I help you? And he was like, yes.
Yeah, he's like, to be honest, I've never golfed.
He had never. Well, he'd golfed, but like he had no golf background. But he was a psychologist, and he had these amazing sports psychology techniques. Wow. But he had no golf technique. Wow. And here I come walking in, and I've got all these golf techniques. Wow. So it was like this perfect marriage. And so we went from, but just to step back, when we did that, I sat down with him. I said, okay, but here's the deal. I want to create a golf team that's different than the way anybody does traditional golf teams. Yeah. So the traditional way of building a golf team is the philosophy is it's an individual sport that happens to be played as a team. Yeah. It's just a bunch of individuals that we happen to count a team score at the end, and there happens to be a team competition. But the way to make a good team is to get the individuals within the team competing against each other. And the philosophy being, if I'm trying to beat you and you're trying to beat me, we're getting better. And then as a byproduct, the team score gets better. Yeah. The problem with that was, and what I witnessed that play is freshmen and sophomores are your best golfers. And by the time they're juniors or seniors, they're burnt out and annoyed and frustrated, because what actually happens is I'm trying to beat you and you're trying to beat me. But what I'm really doing is just hoping you screw up. Yeah. Instead of going, boy, I hope I do my best. Well, or maybe I hope I do my best and I hope he screws up. Yeah. Because I want to beat him. Yeah. And like, you might learn something that could help me, but you're not going to share it with me because you're supposed to beat me.
Against you,
So most college golfers stagnate or sometimes even get worse as they go through their career. So you just see coaches turning over freshmen and sophomores constantly.
Wow.
And my philosophy was, and it was kind of twofold. Number one, it was because I was exploring this faith thing and how can I do an everyday thing and impact other people with it? Yeah. And then number two, I want to create a really competitive golf team. And that's another one of my like tenets. I've always said I want to be an and person. Way too many people say you're an either person. You can, like for my business, you can either run a socially minded business, but provide
you won't be profitable,
lower quality service, or you won't be profitable or whatever, or you can be highly driven, be really good, make a ton of money, but just forget about being a good person. And I'm like, no, I want to be both. I want to be and. And that kind of was birthed out of this golf season of my life, because I was at this Christian school in Minnesota, in downtown Minnesota, with mostly lower income, because it's a more affordable Christian school. So mostly students who aren't wired to be the golfers. And I was like, no, I think we can make a nationally competitive golf team here, but this is how I want to do it. Wow. I want to be I want to be a Christian team that's pouring into each other's lives, creating this brotherhood, creating deep friendships and relationships that will carry them through the rest of their lives. And the old philosophy was either you could be that, but
you'll be a terrible
team. Or you can forget about all that stuff and try to be competitive. And I was like, I want to do all those things and create this brotherhood where they're encouraging each other to be the best men they could possibly be, and to prepare themselves to be the best husbands they could be, to prepare themselves to be the best fathers they could be, and create lifelong relationships so that as they go through life and the storms of life hit, they've got men that they can call on to gather around them. We want to do that, and we want to go and beat everybody we play. We want to win the sportsmanship award and the conference championship. It doesn't have to be either or. And then my bigger life belief in that is that it's in that moment of and where people will start asking the questions of like, wait, I didn't think what's different about
something
you?
Different.
Why are you that way? How is it? Where does that come from? And then that's where it opens the door for the conversation of the bigger picture.
And that's your leadership philosophy that is translated into your marriage, parenthood, business.
Everything. It's and
it's working.
And it's working.
Wow.
So that first year starting the team, we had one kid on the team who'd played golf, and pretty much the rest of them hadn't, and we were terrible, but unbelievable group of guys. We finished last in every single tournament we played in. And then the conference championship, we finished second to last. And it was like, okay, we're on to something. We're on to something. And then
I told you it's going to work.
And brought in some more recruits and things like that. The next year we won the conference championship, and we won 4 years in a row. We were the first Division III conference champion at North Central. Because we won our championship, we ended up going to the national championship. So we were the first national champion representative out of the conference to go to nationals, and the first team at North Central to go to an NCAA national championship. And we did that 3 years in a row. And by the time, so then I took over the team the second year, and our third year in, or fourth year in, third year as champions, we won by like 48 shots or something, which in golf is like
unheard of.
Like in football, it'd be like 80-0 or something like that,
which has happened.
But again, like that was just a byproduct. My belief was if we were off the field encouraging each other to be the best people we could be, when we got to the golf course, we would encourage each other to be the best golfers we could be. And all of a sudden it becomes, oh, hey, I learned this. You should try doing this. Like, let's make each other better. And then by being that, we'll be a team that overachieves and actually plays better than our skill level is.
Yep.
And we'll see where that takes us.
And it worked.
And it worked.
Wow.
And that's been my philosophy with my family, with my career. And so when I left the golf team, I was like, okay, real estate, how can I do that differently? This is the traditional way of doing it. The traditional way is sales and closing deals and whatever. I want to flip that and be relational. I care more about relationships than I do transactions. And if I focus on the relationships and impacting people's stories and making them the best people they can be, the byproduct of that will be that, and I will be successful. And that's just, I feel like that's a philosophy that now I can, if real estate ever stops working out for some reason, I can pull that out and go do something else with that same philosophy and hopefully see success as well.
One of the things that you shared earlier was it's not just the successes that have helped develop your faith, your philosophy of leadership, and personal growth development, but it's some of these low moments in your life. And you mentioned at the beginning in having kids that you had some challenges with your son. And part of the reason having you on this podcast is not just because you're a successful golfer, golf coach, businessman, but you've been able to lead your family through ups and downs. And if you wouldn't mind sharing just, the journey of having your second kid and how you led your family as well as building business at the same time.
So this would have been 2015. Found out my wife was pregnant, or like late 2014, we found out my wife was pregnant with our son, or our child, second child. Found out later as a boy. And totally normal pregnancy and healthy, and he was small all throughout, but you know, we have small kids. My daughter's like never been in the double-digit percentile, so that wasn't a shock. So we were just kind of flowing through life and like, okay, it's our second kid, like we got this. Like that first kid is terrifying, but now we kind of know what we're doing, and it'll be no big deal having another child. And so couple of days before my wife, or before we ended up having our son, my wife kind of just started getting this feeling of like, he had stopped growing, which they were just watching. They were like, it's not that concerning, but we just want to watch it because he's small already, and he stopped growing. So it may just mean that he needs to come. He's ready to come. And so we may not go the full. We were at like 38 or 39 weeks, so it's like we were far enough that they were like, full term. It's no big deal. But we may just kick him out early, and and he's done what he needs to do inside, and let's get him out. But no concerns. But my wife was just like, I think he needs to come out. We need to get him out of there. So we had our 39-week appointment or whatever. My wife's like, I want to, and the doctor was like, yep, I'll listen to you. I'm a big believer in listening to mom, so we'll induce you and we'll go. And huge thing was, and huge point where there are several points throughout the story where I just can see God's hand, where, you know, he didn't orchestrate this thing to happen, but he knew it was coming and was there with us through the journey. And, one of those things was that a lot of times we lived close to Abbott Northwestern in Minneapolis, which is connected to the Children's Hospital. And a lot of times they're so busy, they won't take inductions. So if you get induced, they'll send you to Southdale or one of the quieter hospitals around, because they're so busy with trauma or people that are coming in because they're attached to children's that they have to take the people who need them. But we had given our birth to our first daughter at Abbott, and we lived like a mile down the road. So we're like, if we can't get into Abbott, that'd be great. And she was like, well, don't hold your breath, but we're going to call and see if they're, and she said, oh, great. They're slow tonight. So they said, come on down. So we get down there, and we go into the process, and my wife is in labor, and it's like 1 a.m, and we're like, you know what? Let's get some sleep. She's at like 3 centimeters.
30%.
And our first daughter, she labored for like almost 24 hours. So, and it took her forever to go from like a 3 to a 7. So we were like, okay, we got a long ways to go.
Tons of time.
Let's both try to get some sleep, because we have an infant coming and a second kid. And so I lay down on the couch, and she kind of goes to bed. And just a little bit later, half hour, 45 minutes later, I hear the nurse come in, and she's like, I gotta check you. We just kind of lost his heartbeat for a second, which, you know, happens. You probably just jostled the monitor or whatever. And so she's, looking, and she's like, I'm having a hard time finding it again. Let me call the doctor. So a doctor comes in, and I'm kind of starting to, but at this point they're not showing any signs of anything. So I'm not really stressing out.
Yeah.
And the doctor's like, well, did you check to see if he dropped? He's maybe ready to come out. And she's like, well, we just checked like 40 minutes ago and she was at 3. So I don't think so. The doctor was like, well, let me check. He goes, oh yeah, his head's here. It was like, whoa.
Ready
all of a sudden it's like, whoa, we're going. I'm jumping off the couch and, and the doctor says, okay, push. And boom, he's out. It was like a 37-second, like, and you're like, wow, I was supposed to have another 3-hour nap before this.
This is crazy.
But he comes out, and both my wife and I, after the fact, obviously we didn't know this in the moment, but I was like, man, he is gray. Like, but I just didn't, he's got fluid over him and whatever,
just came out,
but my wife, and he didn't cry. And so I actually thought, I was like, for a split second, I was like, oh, we lost him. Like, I don't think he's alive. And my wife had the same thought.
Because they said the heartbeat stuff.
Yeah.
Like, and
yep. But they didn't seem to be panicking too much, or maybe they were hiding it really well, like, or whatever. But they were like scratching the bottom of his feet really hard, and I'm trying to get him to cry. And about 45 seconds later, all of a sudden he kind of let out this very weak, like, like whatever.
Yeah.
And some color started, and it's like, okay, we're good.
Breathing,
and they put him up on my wife, and, we just thought we're moving, we're good.
Yeah, we're all good.
So for like 3 hours, they had him sleep on my wife, the skin to skin thing. And things seemed to be going okay. They transferred us to another room, and a nurse came in. My wife, it was such like an easy process. My wife was like, oh, I'm going to go take a shower. And I was eating some breakfast, and the nurse was like, okay, I'm just going to check some things. And so she laid him down, and she was checking like his blood sugar levels and things like that. I didn't know that at the time, but that's what she was doing. And all of a sudden she was like, I'm going to take him across the hall. Like, his oxygen levels are just a little low, but this handheld thing isn't super accurate. So I'm going to take him across the hall. I'll be right back. And again, she did a very good job.
Which is actually crazy because having 2 kids, they don't separate the mom and the kid if they don't have to.
Yep. Which I didn't put 2 and 2 together at the time. I was like, yeah, no problem.
Like, all good.
These eggs are delicious.
Oh my goodness.
just those dad fail moments. Yeah. But literally, like, the door closed with her going out, and it immediately swung back open. And like 3, a doctor and like 3 people came in, and they're like, all right, Dad, you're coming with us. And my wife's in the shower, and I'm like, they're like, come across the hall. We got to talk to you. And I walk into the room across the hall, and I mean, there's just flurry of activity, and, all kinds of people swarming in. And, again, another crazy moment was so Abbott and Children's are actually 2 separate entities. They're just in the same building under a similar umbrella, but they're actually 2 separate entities. So somebody had called this oxygen specialist up to check out another kid. And the doctor from Children's was like, this kid's fine. I don't know why. They're fine. Like, why'd I get called? And she turned around to walk out, and that was right when they came with my son.
Wow.
And she immediately, without even no monitors, no nothing, she goes, but that kid is not, and I'm taking him.
Wow.
And so I get into the room, and they're, they've got the mask on him, and they're resuscitating him, and they're doing all this stuff, and they're like, Dad, he might not make it. We got to get down the hall as fast as we can. And that was the other crazy thing to us being at Abbott. I mean, if we had been at another hospital, they would have transferred him to Children's, but he probably wouldn't have survived the transfer. They just didn't have time, much less putting him in an ambulance and getting him across the town and all that kind of stuff. So I'm like, so they're getting ready to take him down the hall, and my wife is in the shower, not even knowing
no idea,
any of this stuff is going on. So I'm like, I got to go tell my wife. So I walk across the hall and knock on the door, and I'm like, hey, I don't even really remember what I said, but I'm like, we're being transferred to Children's. But she's not supposed to, because they're 2 separate entities, they have to like sign out that she can leave,
discharge,
and all that kind of stuff. But they're taking my son down the hall already. And thankfully some nurse was like, just go. So
I'm going to lose my job. Go.
So, or somebody did, I can't remember. Maybe I just did it. I don't know. But my wife got in a wheelchair, and we went down the hall, and for like 3 hours. We watched him working on him. And he wasn't named yet. So they're in there early on. I remember they're in there and they're saying, you know, a baby boy. They're just calling him baby boy because they don't have a name. Yeah. And I leaned down to my wife and I was like, you know, we should name him. And stepping back real quick, the kind of how this is all formative in these dark moments was probably the year leading up to that. I was really learning about how God is an active God and relearning where I used to think that God was orchestrating disasters for good or whatever, you know, relearning how God shows up in the moments of disaster. And then I was learning about like the fact that like the stuff we read in the Bible about healing and words of knowledge and getting words for people of encouragement from God through us. I spent the last year kind of learning about all that. And the week before all this happened, I was in a group at church and we were practicing words of knowledge. And the whole group only gave words for me. For, you know, that wasn't the intent, but all of a sudden one person gave a word for me and another person gave, and they were like, oh, we just see you as like a bridge and your family's on one side and there's like a really rocky river underneath the bridge, but you're the bridge and your family can walk across you to the other side where it's safe. And it's like, and I'm just thinking like, this is all stuff in the past. Like, yeah, we've been through some tough times. Like, thanks. That makes, you know, whatever. And then you're this amazing leader who your family can rely on and you're their rock that they can lean on in any circumstance and like all this stuff. And so flash forward when we're watching my son, all these words are flooding back into my mind of like, holy crap, like
it's for right
now. This is for right now. And I leaned down to my wife and I was just like, we need to name our son. Like we need him to know that he's named, that he's loved, that he has a God who loves him, and no matter how this turns out, he needs to be named. And we didn't have this name on our list at all, but she was like, I think we should name him Elliot. And so I was like, sounds good. So I stuck my head in the room and I just said, hey, you can call him Elliot. And they started calling him Elliot, and immediately his numbers started to change. And I looked it up, and shortly or later I looked it up, and the meaning of Elliot is our God is Jehovah, or Jehovah is my God, and so they stabilized him, and then a cardiologist came in, and they were there for a couple hours, and then they sat us down and they said, okay. So the good news is we found the problem. The bad news is you're meeting with me. And they said he had a total anomalous pulmonary venous connection. So basically, in a nutshell, the good news was all the plumbing was there. It was just all hooked up wrong in his heart.
Really?
Now, any medical person that listens to this is probably going to email or something and say that this is wrong. But, but I don't know. He also had a secondary defect. He had a hole between his right and his left atrium, which is where the oxygenated blood flows from the lungs into the right atrium, flows through the veins to the left atrium, and then flows from the left atrium out to the vitals, and then comes back. And for him, his blood was just going from his lungs to his heart and straight back to his lungs again, the way that his his tubes were hooked up. But the secondary defect, he had a hole in between his right and left atrium, which is not the normal hole that a lot of kids have. And I believe, again, I don't know that this is scientifically accurate, but the way they laid him on my wife was actually the way where that left atrium was down. So blood was flowing through that hole into the left atrium and then getting enough out. Because when he was on my wife, he had color and he was fine. And then it was when the nurse took him off my wife and laid him flat that all of a sudden his color started to drain. And that's when she saw, as soon as she laid him down, she saw his color drain and she knew something was wrong. Again, I don't know how 100% medically accurate that is, but so that hole, regardless, that hole was the one thing that saved his life, because there was just enough oxygen getting to his brain and his, kidneys and liver and whatnot to survive. So they said, we have to do immediate open heart surgery. We are going to have a team, and the children's hospital is just insane. It's insanity what happens in that place day in and day out. It's a place I drove by every day because we lived in South Minneapolis. And you always think like, oh, that's a place where somebody goes sometime when they need it.
Now you're there.
Not like, holy cow, there's people there. There's hundreds of people there every single day. But so they had a team in the emergency or in the operating room. So this was probably at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon at this point or something like that. And they said, we're going to have a team in the operating room on standby, and he's going to be in the room right next door. And we're going to try to get him to survive to 24 hours after birth. Because if he survives to 24 hours after birth, his odds of surviving surgery exponentially increase. But if he's crashing and we have to,
then we'll do it.
We'll just do it. So they had that team there on standby all night. And then at 10 a.m., they brought in a second team to relieve the first team. And then they started the surgery at 10:30. And he went into surgery, and, we had to watch him go through the doors and not know if that was the last time we'd see him again. So for 6 hours we're sitting there just waiting, and he came out of surgery, and we were there for 4 weeks, which in and of itself was a miracle. They prepped us that we could be there for months. And they said really the hardest thing is eating, actually, because he never swallowed, because he had issues right away. They immediately put tubes in to feed him and to keep him alive and all that kind of stuff. So they said that swallowing is such an instinctive thing, and he'll go 3 or 4 weeks without swallowing. So we can't teach him how to swallow. So once we start feeding him, some kids pick up on it right away, and some kid there was a girl that was next to us who had been there for 10 months, and she was fine. She just couldn't eat. And so they were preparing us that could be the case. But for 2 weeks, it was touch and go for a while there. He had some moments where they almost went back in for a second surgery, and his PICC line, which was feeding him medicine to keep his heart regulated, pain medicine, all that kind of stuff, clogged at one point. So they lost control of his body, and his heart rate was skyrocketing and plummeting. And you could see he was in pain. And they almost had to go into another surgery for that. But we sent a message out to people, and we're just like, hey, we need to pray right now. And literally a minute later, a nurse walked over they were about to wheel him out. And she was like, I'm just going to try. And she injected some medicine, and it went right through. And the PICC line, which was only supposed to last like 7 or 8 days, ended up lasting like 12. And he stabilized and came out of it. And then the first time they fed him, he took down like 15 ounces or something like that, which is just insane.
Just starving.
And so it was like 4 weeks we were out and home. And now he's 3 years old, and we go in, super healthy. We go in. We used to go in once a week, and then they'd cut it back to once every other week, and then once a month. And at his 2-year appointment, the doctor was like, honestly, if he didn't have a scar, I'd have no clue anything was wrong with him.
Really?
They said his echocardiograms look perfect. Nothing. So he has no restrictions. He has no. They told us we can actually wait 2 years before we come back.
No way.
It's crazy.
He's a boy.
He's a boy. And he is all boy.
Wow. Man,
and he just
awesome.
runs around like crazy, and and he is just full of life. So it's fun to watch. But those moments, it was really fun to me looking back. Like, one of the things I'm grateful for in those dark moments or low moments, now in hindsight and looking back, like, it was fun to go through a tough season, but with a different set of eyes. And we talked earlier about circumstances throwing us one way or the other, and to look at it and go, my circumstances didn't change who I was. My confidence, my joy, my peace, my belief. And again, you don't want to go through those circumstances. You don't wish anybody to go through those circumstances, but it's in those moments where you can see how far you've come, or where God's showing up. And for him to be able to look at you and say, you matter to me. Your son matters to me. I created all of this, but I know what you're going through. I see you, and you matter. and I'm here. I'm here for you. I did not plan for this to happen. This was not my design. This was not what I created. But this is the broken world we currently live in.
Yeah.
And in the midst of it, I'm here.
Yeah.
And you can know your true identity as my son and my daughter, and your father always shows up and is always here for you.
Wow. Your whole life and who you are, not just the things that you've done, but who you've become and who you are is incredibly inspiring. And the character that you have, just the code of ethics that you live by, philosophy of leadership, but even that story of the birth of your son and leading your family. I love that you brought up, words of knowledge, and that those words came true in that moment. That
Absolutely.
You were the bridge for your family, and specifically for your son, the bridge to life. You know, and the moment of naming him is so powerful. And so I just want to say thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely.
Today. I feel like it's such a anticlimactic thing to ask you your favorite book or anything like that, because it's just what you've gone through. Not only the success in business, but the success as a husband, as a leader within your family, as a father. Man, that's the stuff that matters. You know, that's the legacy. Beyond the business stuff, I think the Nepal and giving people home, that is eternal work. That is, there's reward in heaven for that, which is amazing. But the legacy stuff is you being a dad and you being a husband. That's the stuff that I love and gravitate towards. And so thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely.
And I guess we can throw it in there, but do you have a favorite book?
Well,
maybe the Donald Miller.
Yeah, I was going to say I have a lot of favorite books, and this would definitely rank right up there. But actually, one of Donald Miller's other books, A Million Miles in 1,000 Years, is a book that's driven about story and this concept of story and how our life is a story. And you need to be living a better story. And so many of us are not living good stories. And so that was just an extremely powerful, formative book for me of that concept of story. And that's really that idea, which is from God. And, it's not about me. It's not about Donald Miller. It's not about any of these other amazing people that are on this podcast. But it's what God's designed and put in people that is coming out and manifesting itself. And that idea that he's placed us here for a reason, and our story matters, and our story affects other people's stories and calls other people to live a better story, and calls the gold out of people. There's gold inside of everybody. Let's just call the gold out in everybody. So that book was hugely formative in that idea of thinking bigger, both for my own life, but all the lives around me and all the stories that are being written.
Great. And do you have, you can choose what aspect to speak to, but maybe one word of advice for anybody that's following in your footsteps?
I just say get in the game. God, whether it's fatherhood, husband, real estate, career, missions, whatever it is, just get in the game. We need as many people in the game as we can. So let's all just get in the game and run.
Let's do it. It's amazing. Thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
It's been awesome. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this, we'd love for you to subscribe to this channel. We've got new episodes releasing every single week. We'd also love to hear your questions or comments. You can comment below. You can also find us on Instagram at Exception Podcast. And I want to give a quick shout out to our producer, Tissel. My name's Kirk Graham, and we'll see you back next week.